Hello everyone, it's class time, your daily classroom for CSEC and CAPE students. You can watch us in real time on Television Jamaica's YouTube channel or One Spot Media. We are also live on gojamaica.com. The subjects for today are information technology and geography for CSEC, and for CAPE we have economics. We start with information technology. I am Mr. Lewis. Let's begin. So today, we're going to try to give you an overview as to what the CSEC syllabus entails. I can understand from, past experience with students, they'll find the subject a little bit daunting. But hopefully today we can shed some light on some of these areas and of course give you a broader perspective on what IT is about. Now, some of your resources, we must admit that even though we are at home, and we don't have textbooks, we're not at school, we might not be seeing our teachers. It's important that we understand that there are a ton of resources on the web, and you can get them whenever you want. If you don't have any access to the internet whatsoever, and you're possibly listening on the radio or watching the television, it's important that you call your school and find out what's going on. Can you get the textbook on rental as it should be? Or are there any other resources or hard copy resources that can be brought to you? All right? So you need to remember that there are books out there for you. One for the introduction, I think from first to third form, there's the Just Click. And then information technology from Gay and Blades. I think they are the third edition. And then you have some online resources. I was always told you don't use Wikipedia, but there are some, it's becoming credible, so you can use online resources. And then, of course, try to contact your teacher. Your teacher is always going to be a source of information, all right? For me personally, if you want to get in touch with me, my email is leo.lewis1@gmail.com, and I'll try to shoot you some of my resources if you have that kind of a need, all right? So, what is information technology? The layman's term, it's computers, basically. The use of computers, either for the processing or communication of information. And therefore, there are a couple of things that we pay attention to when we talk about information technology. The things that come into play is data and information and the actual tools we use. And so when we pay attention to those things, it is important that we identify how they interplay. All right? According to the Merriam-Webster, it's the technology involving the development, maintenance, and the use of computer systems, software, and networks for the processing and distribution of data. In layman's terms, computers being used to manipulate data. That's what information technology basically is. But let us take a kind of an analogy as it relates to where did this all come from. Now, there's a lot of history behind computing, but the fact of the matter is, it's kind of created to map who we are as human beings. If you check yourself, hopefully you check yourself this morning, and your eyes were working, your ears were working, your hands and your feet were working, and if they weren't working, then you need to call the doctor or you find somebody who will check them out for you. But the fact is, our bodies act as information sources or data sources or the recipient of data sources. Our eyes get visual data, all right? As we look around, we see all kind of things around us, and that's visual data. We see that as visual data because we see different colors, right? We see models, we see 3D shapes, all those things. Our ears gives us auditory data, all right? And then, of course, your mouth and your nose gives you different types of data. And some of you might be saying, your nose and, well, you need to look up smell-o-vision from IBM, and you'll see where we're going with the nose issue. But your skin also works like a receptor. And so what we're trying to do with computers is to convert them into us, so to speak, being able, of course, to do what we do, but do it more efficiently. The very first set of computers, which you should have learned from possibly first or second form, is the UNIVAC and the ENIAC. And those were very large computers that filled up a room. And believe me, they didn't have the processing power like your current iPhone or your current Android. They didn't have that kind of processing power, but For the day, it was considered remarkable because they could have done their calculations using some other machine and it would be a little bit faster than, human beings would have done it. All right? And then we decided that we needed to do more. So what more? When we look at our own environment, we see where we can more or less get information in different formats. What are these formats? Well, we have text. And text formats are like characters, alphanumeric characters, words, sentences, numbers. These are the text formats that we are acquainted with. And as a matter of fact, our acquaintance with it would not have existed unless we went to school and we understood what these symbols mean. All right? And then we have other forms of symbols like musical or mathematical symbols, your plus sign, your percentage sign. And all these other signs for integration, differentiation, some of you who are in sixth form and might be doing pure math, all right? And then we have pictures in our environment, actual pictures, or drawings or paintings that people might do. Then graphics and shapes, squares, triangles, all these things. And if we are supposed to make your computer understand this, we have to find a way to get this information or this data into the computer. And also, we have to be able to verify what the computer gets. And that is where we have to pay attention to what information technology is. That is how we need to pay attention to it. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to ensure that our computers can get this data that we understand, which is called human-readable data, all right, or human-readable information. Maybe you want to use them interchangeably, even though they are not, right? But you want the computer to be able to do what? Get this data and represent it or present it in a way that we understand in the real world. So if you intend on being a scientist or possibly a chemical engineer, possibly you want to be a civil engineer, many of the times you'll be handling or dealing with computers that have to be measuring different kinds of things for your chemicals. I remember it was just recently a friend, well, not a friend, but a student of mine came back from university and said, "Sir, you need to teach these children how to program because we don't do anything without a computer." And she's studying to be an engineer, and that's abroad. So everywhere we go, no matter what we're doing, we still see where computers are being used. Your phone, of course, is the most common one, all right? You are giving and getting data and information from your phone. So what exactly is happening or taking place in our minds? And let's get back to our bodies, how we look, right? Our eyes and ears function like receptors or receivers. And of course, there might be some output from these receptors as well. But your brain acts as the information center. So your brain is where everything is processed. So let's say, you smell your mother's cooking. Because of the knowledge that might exist in your mind already, you might be saying, okay, mommy, I cook curry goat. And maybe she decide, that's what she wants to cook, and you can't bother because you know the smell of curry goat. You're like, sure. What is happening there? Simple. Your nose picks up this smell, and when your nose picks up this smell, then your brain begins now to check, okay, do I know this smell? And if it is uncommon, you're going to be like, okay, that not smell right, so let me go into the kitchen. Let me find out what's going on with the pot. So here we are understanding what's happening in our own brains and with our own mind. Let's say, for instance, you hear a new melody, right? Your brain takes that and goes, okay, that sounds like music. But if it's something unfamiliar, you might begin to tune in to hear what's going on with it. If it is something familiar, something that you're used to and something that you like, the brain might say, okay, at time, stamp your foot, dance. And so we're having these communications taking place between our receptors and our information center. And it's forcing us, so to speak, to act or to think in a way that we please or we choose. And so that is where we are trying to look at computers, or from the angle, which that's the angle we're looking at. So what's happening? We have our bodies, physical bodies are basically the hardware. And when we look at hardware, when we're talking about hardware, we're talking about things that we can tangibly behold, we can touch. These things are tangible. We can see them, we can touch them. And at this level, maybe, you might be asked, what is the definition of hardware? We don't necessarily say, things that you can see and touch. We want you to be specific. We want you to say the devices of the computer, which are tangible devices, all right, created in and modeled so that we can actually see them. So tangible devices. So what are they? Well, as we mapped it before, our brains are like is like the CPU in the computer. That's the information center. But not only is our brains like the CPU, what's happening in our brain is that we are storing information as well. All right? We're storing information as well in our memory. And most of us have what we call long-term or short-term memory. And we're trying to map that as well to the computer. A computer has memory, RAM, RAM we call it. But also there's long-term memory. Now, you might argue that long-term memory is storage, but when we want to store something for a long period of time, we tend to write it down. And storage acts in that very same way as well. What else do we have? Our hands. Our hands act like, robots' hands. We don't act like robot hands, but if you look at our hands and look at the technology that's going on, we're creating, or we have created, different kind of machinery that have hand-like features. Look at an assembly line where a car is being made, and it's things like a door being welded onto it, or welded onto the car, or something being tweaked in the car. That's hand-like feature, all right? And then we are going even further where that is concerned, because now we are into robotics, and I know many of you might have watched iRobot with Will Smith, and you might have seen what that CGI looked like. It's coming there, not there yet, but it's very close. And there are many different types of robots being created now with hands and feet. And you might find some of them in Japan. Well, if you search on the web, you should find them. All right? Then we have feet, and then we go to robotics again. And even further, we're going to, some of us plan to go to Mars, or some people plan to go to Mars. All right? And, that's where we get the movement from. All right, listen. We are going to take a break, okay? We're going to pause and continue when we get back. So get some juice. See you after the short break.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much.
COVID-19 tip. Protect yourself and others from getting sick by washing your hands after coughing or sneezing, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare food, before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, and after handling animals or animal waste.
Welcome back. Let's pick up where we left off. So we were looking at the idea of mapping computers to humans, because essentially that's what IT is about, trying to get the computer to do what we do, but faster and more efficiently. So we're talking about brain, hands, feet, and all that, but now we look at ears and eyes and what these receptors do. What we want to pay attention to where these are concerned is how do we get the computer to actually listen to audio or listen to voice or use or produce audio. And that's where the ears come in, that's where the mouth comes in. So you get speakers to hear what the computer is producing. All right? That's like the mouth. You get microphones. That acts like the ears, all right? And then for all of those things coming together, there are nerve endings in our bodies that allow for this connection. And that means in your computers, you need that kind of a connection between your devices. As long as you have those connections, you're good to go, all right? But then there are other things that happens in our brain as we process data. The fact is we can't see the processes that happen in our brains. In order for anyone to see that, we'll have to do a scan and all of that. But then again, we can only see brain activity or electric pulses going on in our brains or through our bodies. We don't really know and can't really, per se, quantify thought. And that's the very same kind of idea when it comes to software and, of course, data. We can't really and truly put hands on thought unless somebody writes it down. Same thing with software. Software is all about this logical, this unseen thing that takes place behind the scenes so that you can make a phone call, so that you can send a text, so that you can use a WhatsApp call, all right, so that you can make arrangements on your calendar. You are seeing a representation on your monitor, but there are tons of things going on in the background that you really can't see and can't touch, all right? So we get to that place. So the idea with your computers is that what? We provide data. Data is being provided. And data, by definition, or by our definition in IT, is unprocessed facts. All right? Numbers, words, with no structure whatsoever or no meaning. And then we have what is called information, or we consume information. All right? And that information or that consumption of information, of course, helps to get us wiser, get us to do what we need to do. For example, if you know that your gym opens at 5:30, you can plan your day to go to the gym, get to school, and then get back home to study. And of course, we create the hardware and software that makes this process of conversion from data to information possible. For some of you who are doing CAPE IT, you might have studied data flow diagrams, which demonstrates what data is being provided to a system and then what flows out of that system to the provider or to other sources. Same difference here, same kind of idea. So what is this information technology course about? Actually, what we're trying to do is to get you in the frame of mind of understanding who is a creator and who is a user. If you do information technology at school, the fact is the syllabus is designed so that it gives you a broad spectrum, so that you can understand what hardware is, what software is, how they interplay, and whether or not we can use them for our services or use them for anything we want. Most often than not, I find when students want to do information technology, they are more interested in using the technology, not necessarily in becoming a creator. And so you have to begin now to establish in your mind that I'm doing this subject because it's teaching me to be a creator. If that is not what you want, you still should finish the course, because knowledge is power. Well, the use and application of knowledge is power. So as a user, right, we give information, or we give data and get information, and we interact with the hardware and the software. So we are texting, or we are typing, or we are speaking, or in the case of some people who might want to become musicians later on, you're playing an instrument, or you're singing into a microphone. For those of you who want to become engineers, you might be, or architects, you might be drawing something on a digitizing tablet, and so you are using the tools. As a creator, you're analyzing the data and information needs of users, basically. So if I decided that, I want to become a website or I want to do web pages, I want to design web pages, or maybe I want to become a computer scientist or a programmer or a software engineer, what you'll be paying attention to is what are the needs of certain users in the world sphere. You analyze that, analyze their information needs, whatever data they might need, and then take the tools that you have and create the software and the hardware for these people. So being a creator mostly is what the subject is about, but it covers a lot of things about users as well. So the fundamental things are the sections in your syllabus. What are they? We're talking about computer fundamentals and information processing. And we look at what that is: computer networks and web technology, social and economic impact of information technology, or information and communication technology. And you might hear the two terms being used interchangeably some of the time, or because there's been an expansion. So we talk about information and communication when we talk about computers and computer technology. Then we look at word processing and web page design, spreadsheet, database management system, problem solving, and program design and program implementation. So these are the basic topics of your syllabus. So computer fundamentals, and it's normally hardware is started with when, or maybe your teacher decides to start with something else. It depends on the teacher, and it depends on what you might have informed the school with your previous grades, whatever the case is. For me personally, I tend to give my students a pre-test that would have given them an idea as to what the course is about. And most often than not, they feel it, but it's not recorded. It's just something to help them to get into the frame of mind of what the course is about and test them on what they think they already know or understand. So when they get that pre-test, you'll see a lot of things about hardware and software, or they'll be focused on input and output devices, which, of course, you should have learned from first through to third form. So, but when we talk about computer fundamentals, especially hardware, we're talking about the types of computers: supercomputers, mini computers, mid-range. And you might not see mid-range, but what it is like a go-between for mini and mainframe computers. You might see it on an IBM website or somewhere of that sort. And then you have personal computers, which you are acquainted with, your tablets, your laptops, your desktops. And then we talk about the major components of your computers. Now, no matter what type of computer you might meet upon, or no matter what type of computer you're studying, you are going to identify, or you are going to find these major components. And these major components, and we're talking about hardware components now, are your input, your processing, your output, all that. System specifications. What are since about 4 or 5 years ago, one of the key questions on the CSEC syllabus has to do with the ability to identify what the specifications of a computer are. All right, you will get the specifications and you will have to extract information from that list. And that's pretty easy if you know what you're doing. All right, and then basic troubleshooting, which comes under things like technician work. You check cables, you check if memory is out of place. We won't necessarily go into checking how your hard drive works or actually going into your hard drive. But if you're interested, talk to your teacher and maybe they'll organize some kind of physical workspace where they can demonstrate something to you. Or if you're not on Google Meets, or you don't meet on Google Meets or Zoom or one of those things, it might be kind of important for you or for your career. So you can talk to your school, see if you can arrange something where you follow all the guidelines or all the COVID guidelines, and just head to school and you put something together. All right? When we talk about software in computers, I remember we're talking about that as if it were thought. We're talking about the different types of software we can find inside a computer or inside of the whole sphere of information and communication technology. System software, which includes operating system and utilities. Now, sometimes we don't make a definite distinction between these things, but there are distinctions. For those of us who are acquainted with other forms of operating systems, you will tend to find out that there are several different distinctions between these things. Those of you who use Windows, you will find that all kind of other pieces of software that are utility software are included, like your firewalls, your antivirus programs, your disk defragmenters, etc. And those are all utilities that are included with Windows. You can buy some of them, and some of them do cost a pretty penny, but they are there under the banner of utilities. And then we have the other types of software, which are application software, and we're talking about general purpose and all those other things that we'll be going through for the remainder of the term. And then we look at information processing. Now remember, when we started before, we said that the definition of information technology has to do with looking at the data and the tools. Now, information processing is extremely important in the sphere of information technology. Why? Simply because the tools are being used to manage the data and the information. In this case, we need to pay attention to what data is and what information is. And then also we need to look at what information sources are. Where do we get information from? How do we get the information? And some of the times we don't think about the format, but it is important to think about the format, because if you are going to get a piece of information and you want the computer to use it or to manipulate it, you have to identify what that format is. You have to be able to get that format, get it to the computer so it can do what it's doing. All right? And then we have data validation and verification techniques. And these techniques go into like proofreading, checking or double checking to see what's right, what's wrong on the data that is being entered. And then validation goes into whether or not the data types of the information or data coming into your system makes or meets a certain kind of criteria. For example, if I'm supposed to enter my name, let's say into a Google form or into a Word form, my name should essentially contain alphabetic characters. So I can test to see if a user is entering numbers for their name. And we are entering numbers, then that would not be a valid entry. And then we have file organizations which date back to the history of computing when we usually use sequential file systems, But now in this day and age, we still even though we still use it, we are paying more attention to random storages. And so, but we're going to go into a history of that, what it looks like, and why we use it. Some of the cameramen here might can attest, I'm not sure how old they are, but some very early cameras, you might laugh after me, some very early cameras had tapes. So as my shaking head, somebody needed to catch him, so my shaking head. Right, so it had tape inside the camera, and as they filmed, that tape was recorded on, all right? And that is where you'd see a sequential storage taking place, because then you have to reel through the tape right, in order to find a particular section, or you have to play through the entire tape. Now everything is recorded to a server or to some kind of a memory card, so you can immediately go and get the information, or even go to any part in that in that file. So file organization is important as well. All right, and then network and computer networks and web technology. I'm trying to hurry up now because the time. But anyway, the computer networks and web technology are basically where we are at right now in terms of, some people might say human evolution. I disagree, but human creation. But the idea now is that everything will be some kind of, or have some kind of connection with the web. There were years, well, when I was younger, when I thought that I would never see a phone where I'd be able to talk to somebody face to face. But no, here they are. Yes, I'm that old. And then, of course, I never thought that I'd have a watch that could, take my temperature, test my heart rate. But all of these things coming to the fore are becoming now connected to the internet. And that is just, to me, that's mind-blowing. Well, for me, because I'm kind of old. And then we have mobile networks. We have types of networks. And under that types of networks, we have mobile networks. Now, just going back to types of networks, some of you already know, we're talking about wide area networks, which the internet is. We have local area networks, which some of you might think is at your school. But when we classify networks as wide area or local area, it tends to deal with the physical space. Unfortunately enough, we're a third world country, or I think we still are a third world country. We are small spaces that we call local area networks. Might truly not be local area networks in other countries, but we try to establish like the number of users connected to the network to basically classify it. And then we have mobile networks, which just basically means networks that can move around basically, or mobile networks, using your phones, small networks that are not stationary or in one place. And then we have function of the components, and the components include connections, include switches, routers, and all that. And some of you have routers at home. If you don't have any router at home, you know how that goes, no internet. And then web technologies, which include the creation of websites and web pages, all right? So we're trying to go fast. All right, and then we have the social impact. Now, believe it or not, whenever computers enter an organization, whether it be a school, whether it be a place of business, a government agencies, there's always going to be some kind of change. And the changes might impact the organization for the better. And if you're going to be an information technology professional, you might have to be in a place, or will be in a place, where you have to be able to measure the benefits as opposed to the downfalls that might occur. For example, we're in TVJ's studio now, and we have smart boards, we have laptops, we have all this machinery going on, and this has possibly enhanced the television program. But the fact is, even though they've enhanced the television program, TVJ has to get lighting, has to get AC. That means that's more electricity bill. So there are impacts that we need to pay attention to, and that is what this is about, all right? Beyond money, it will impact the people working there, all right? Maybe some people would have to be retrained. Maybe some people get let go, as hard as it sounds. But when we look at these impacts, we can make an assessment, I believe, as to what we want to change, how we want to add information technology, and how we want the society to benefit from it. Right? Then we have the software that we look at, word processing, and some of you should already know what this looks like, but there are two key features that you'll be focusing on, and that's mail merge and fillable forms. And we spoke about that earlier, having forms that you create in Microsoft Word that you can send over the web and people can fill it out. And and do your business like that. But we'll look at that in more detail as the weeks progress. Mail merge is simply creating one template document that you might want to send to several different persons, and editing features like reviewing, like cut and paste, find and replace, and all that. Then we have web design, and again, we spoke about this earlier, hyperlinking, creating website and web pages, and that's part of what we have to do for the syllabus. And one thing has to be said is that there will be no HTML. You don't have to learn HTML at this level. So what's good about that is that you can design a web page in Microsoft Word. You can save a spreadsheet as a web page. You can save a publisher document as a web page. You can even go online and use, I think it's Wix. You can use Wix, Weebly, one of those free website offerings, even WordPress to create a website. But when we do it, when you're doing it for your SB or for CXC, it's important that you take a shot of the screen as well as you might want to include the code just in case. All right. And then we have databases, which is a little bit, well, it's not hard, but I think the understanding of it tends to elude students. And so you'd be able to create a database, you'd be able to create tables and relationships, and of course that means basically linking the tables. And then we have queries, forms, reports, all features that is going to ensure us, or basically help us to learn how databases function. Databases is pretty key because on the web, everything is run on a database. If you think about, like, maybe some of you would want to visit IMDb, where it stores a database of movies that exists in the world. That's a database, and that's a huge database. So database run the world, basically. Problem solving. We look at breaking down your problems into different sections, IPO charts, and that's what that IPO chart is about. And then after we do the IPO chart, there's algorithms, flow charts, pseudocodes, all ways to represent what a program should look like. And then we have program implementation, and that's where we learn Pascal, and we're able to code programs and debug, test, and all of that. All right. Just one other one, and I think I possibly didn't change this properly. It's supposed to be spreadsheets, not web design. So my bad there. But they're supposed to be spreadsheets. And so we have data types, charting, pivot tables, cell referencing, and working with multiple sheets under spreadsheets. All right. So this is basically what your syllabus will look like for the year. All right. And as you do your own kind of work, as you do your own preparation at home, again, I must encourage you, try to think about how you learn as a student. All right. Some of you might be studying in a noisy environment and that is not working. Some of you might be studying on your beds, that not working because you want to fall asleep. So try to study in an environment that is conducive for your learning. Because remember, at the end of the day, well, not at the end of the day, but we are information people. All right? We're information people. And the idea of studying, you're trying to get this information in so that you can present it on a test. All right? And the conditions under which you get it into your brain have to be right. Just like the computer, it has to be the right type of data. It has to make up or be a particular format. It has to be valid. You have to be able to find out whether or not this thing is right. And as you read, as you study, you pay attention to those variables. It will be easier and easier for you to retain what you should be learning. So again, this was information technology, And I hope that I've given you enough of an overview so that you can begin your own preparation. As usual, I have to thank TVJ for this initiative and the Ministry of Education for this initiative as well. For those of you who don't have internet access, please you need to tune in so that you can get your content and be ready for your exams. That's it for today's lesson. I encourage you to review and practice. If you have any questions, send them to either Television Jamaica's Facebook page at Television Jamaica or to Instagram at television_Jamaica. Or simply use the hashtag TVJ class time. And I'll see how many of those questions we can respond to. Stick around. CSEC Geography is after the break. Bless.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much.